2022 fucking sucked for games. Nothing good happened. Gaming is dead. Thanks for watching. Okay, for real though. When I think about what I consider my games of the year, I like to find it's more fun to talk about just what I've played period instead of what just came out this year. Since in most cases I tend to find myself drawing a blank when it comes to the big releases that came out most years. Not because they're bad or anything, but in most cases I don't have much interest and I tend not to play them until years later when hype has died down and I'm just not as distracted with other games. That, and I find that if I just restrict myself to what comes out in a certain year, I'm absolutely just miserable with the state of everything. In general, I find games just to be a real fun and personal medium, almost like reading a book, and I like hearing that personal experience people have with them as they go. So with all that said, here are my favorite games I played this year. But before we get into it though, I want to quickly discuss some games I played that either just barely made the cut or just aren't finished yet I feel are still worth talking about. Despite my reservations of the genre getting stale, we still got a lot of great indie shooters this year, even if the quantity is really starting to overwhelm the quality at this point. Listen, never ask a woman her age, a man his salary, and me what I thought about 90% of the games that were shown at Realms Deep, because you will probably hate what I have to say. This is not something you should aspire for when making a game. But yeah, even if it wasn't all perfect, we still got a lot of great stuff this year, and even more to look forward to in the next year.
The Syn virus is rapidly spreading its tendrils across the city. Your mission, burn it out. Purge it at absolutely any cost. Good hunting, sir.
Turbo Overkill's first two episodes were the first real thing that came out this year that, for me, said that this genre still had quite a bit of steam in it. A worthy second comeback for Apogee, even if I personally find the first episode just to be a tiny bit better. It's a game that's constantly one-upping itself with the question, what's cooler than the chainsaw leg? And just continues on from there. I love it. It's a fun movement shooter that takes elements from other games prior and twists it all in a way that still feels unique and fun at the same time. And with mod support and multiplayer on the way, I'm excited to see what Sam and the team has in store for episode 3 in the full release. Although I still think you guys need to add the old Apogee jingle to the title screen. It just isn't an Apogee game without it if you ask me. Ultra Kill's second act came out and was even better than the first. Still disagree that it's the best shooter of all time though. For fuck's sake, you guys, it's not even done yet, and even for how good this game is, it still has issues. Like these fucking wide-ass levels not being fun to play through in a total bitch to P rank. I swear to Christ, I've been stuck on Bridge Burner for 3 months, and no matter what I try, I always miss one enemy because some asshole thought it was so hilarious to put 69 enemies on the first Lust level and put in butt plug support instead of making the first act even slightly more challenging. You guys always talk about how great of a boss Minos Prime is, and I wanna fight him, yet no matter what I try, I just can't. Oh, and I know you guys love to say just how not overpowered the charge pistol is, and I believe you. In fact, let me give you a tip and say de-equip everything except for that, and just watch the freshness meter never go down. Overall, good game. Probably gonna be a game of the year contender for me once it's done. For as much as I was calling it a shallow Doom clone, Proteus surprised me with its great overall feel and stellar level design. No surprise as many of the classic Doom community's best mappers were involved. Although that checkpoint system really killed any other serious enjoyment of it for me since it pretty much negated any challenge these amazing maps and encounters could have posed. That, and it kinda just ends suddenly. It's a fun shooter to relax to, and I'll probably pick it up again once some DLC comes out, but I really feel it could have been better had they removed or reworked that checkpoint system to keep the challenge in place. Selaco's demo really surprised me. From the trailers and other footage I saw, I assumed this to be another bland, average, paid GZ mod, but I couldn't have been any more wrong. It's an excellent, fast-paced shooter with its own spin on the genre that pushes the engine to such limits that I really had to ask myself at points if this really was GZ Doom still, because it feels absolutely nothing like it on a gameplay stance. Most Doom projects have that game's certain style of movement in it, where you're bobbing up and down in such an exaggerated way and never really stop still, yet Selaco doesn't have this feel at all. It feels like a completely different game, and a great one at that. If you were skeptical of Selaco like I was based on what the devs have shown in videos, I encourage you to play for yourself, because the footage really doesn't do the game justice if you ask me. Between this and Brutal Fate, I'm really excited to see what more people do with the GZ Doom engine on a professional level.
Prepare a carriage. They want us to bring him to the city gates.
Gloomwood finally came out in early access and has just continued to shoot up higher and higher to some of my most anticipated indie games. I still remember playing that old demo, and while not bad, you could just tell from the early access release how much work Dylan and the rest of the team has put into making this the best game it can possibly be. A great mix of both immersive sims like Thief and the limited resource management and gloomy tone of the survival horror genre. My only issue is that I feel cane sword blocking is still a little too overpowered, and in its place a more standard time parry could work better, but other than that I can't wait for what 2023 holds for Gloomwood. It feels like we've gotten a lot of first-person roguelikes during the past few years, all of them with various mixed results. But Deadlink feels like the real first one to be truly amazing. It shares the same random boon perk model as Hades, but also the resource management and fast movement-based gameplay from something like Doom Eternal. It's still in its early days right now, but I have a really good feeling that Deadlink is going to be one of, if not the best first-person roguelike out there once it's finished. So Cultic is a weird one for me to put in here, because it's technically listed as a complete game, yet I also don't consider it that since it's just the first chapter with the second one being sold later. Not an issue for me, I'll gladly pay for it with how solid everything is so far, but I really can't help but feel that the early access model is really starting to bite 3D Realms in the ass with just how many projects they're working on and with how infrequent the updates seem to be across a lot of them, despite it supposedly being spread across several teams. Either way, Cultic feels a lot more like its own thing compared to the other games people tend to group it with, like Blood, and I personally appreciate that. It's got some elements from Blood, your cultists, sprawling levels, old-timey western weaponry, but there's a lot of stuff from other games in here too. I mostly felt a mix of that and also some Resident Evil 4, with some of the weapons and enemies like these shield guys, plus that overall design of combat freedom it's going for. I also felt a bit of Return to Castle Wolfenstein in this too, with that Catacombs level and the FG42 that you get that can be later upgraded to be full auto like in that game. Cultic is a fun, atmospheric shooter with one of the most unique art styles and sound direction I've seen in a game, and I can't wait to see what Chapter 2 ends up its sleeve. Now what else happened this year? Postal 4 finally came out, even if it was probably way too early. Okay, I do have some faith it'll improve over time like 2 did, and Brain Damage was a fun enough spin-off that I could forgive any other shortcomings RWS had this year. A group of modders made a better serious Sam game than Crow Team could, even if it still ran like ass. Shadow Warrior 3 was really fun, if you ignored how the characters were somehow even more annoying than the last game. I've heard some updates have added an actual level select alongside some more replay value, but I just haven't felt like touching it since then. Fun game, but too short for its own good and the price it was asking for. Maybe one day I'll pick it up again. Modern Warfare 2022's campaign was surprisingly good, even if I do personally prefer Cold War and the Black Ops games over it, and the multiplayer being really mixed. I surprisingly had some fun with Warzone and DMZ though, and Prox Chat absolutely needs to be a standard feature in this series from here on out.
Oh, what the fuck? How did this dude just shoot me?
Because your ass?
And there's still a ton of other stuff from this year I need to get through that I've heard amazing stuff about. Signalis, Faith, TMNT Shredder's Revenge. I only recently finished Evil West, and this game just absolutely bangs. I really wish I could have talked about this one more at length, but I just have enough games I want to talk about as it is. Maybe in the future I'll do a video on it. And most importantly for me, I finally started my channel this year. It's been a fun ride so far, and I really do want to thank everyone for sticking with me and watching my stuff. I started this channel with the idea of just doing it for fun, whether or not I even got any attention, but the fact I have it all is just crazy for me to think about, and I couldn't be any more grateful. And I have some big plans for 2023 that I think a lot of you guys are going to be excited about.
Let's go!
Just hear me out, okay? I've already talked at length about why I enjoy Cyberpunk so much, so I'm going to keep this rather brief. But despite the awful launch and still remaining issues, I've come out of 2077 hopeful for the future of the IP and for CD Projekt Red. And with Phantom Liberty set to come out next year and a sequel in the far future, I feel things are only going to improve more and more. Some people feel I may have gone a bit too hard in some aspects regarding the opening in my video, and maybe you're right. But I spoke the way I did because I know for a fact I wasn't the only one who felt that way on launch day. And how Edgerunners introduced the world alone was a key reason for many, including myself, that they decided to get reinvested into 2077's story. And even then, in the long run, my issues with the opening don't get in the way with the positivity I feel towards the rest of the game nowadays. It's not perfect, but the compelling stories and combat freedom is what continues to keep me coming back to Cyberpunk, and with mods slowly becoming more and more prevalent and advanced, I really do believe I'll be playing this next to something like New Vegas for years to come.
During the time of the Pharaohs, the city of Karnak was a shining example of civilization that all other nations could only hope to emulate. Today, Karnak lives on, surrounded by the spirits of the past. However, something has gone terribly wrong.
Lobotomy Software's cult classic shooter Powerslave has been on my list for a while now, and this year was the best time to get into it with the official Exhumed remaster courtesy of Night Dive Studios. Powerslave is what you get when you mix together sprite-based shooters like Doom or Duke 3D with Metroidvania design, and I'm so happy I finally tried it this year. I don't play a whole lot of Metroidvanias, mainly because I tend to get preoccupied with other games quite a bit, and in turn I forget about a lot of the other stuff I need to beat, but I really feel I should try beating some of them again at some point with just how enjoyable I found this. It wasn't completely perfect, I couldn't stand the sunken city, and some of the platforming bits before you get the sandals or feather can be a bit trial and error, but other than that, I totally recommend this even if you don't have much experience with Metroidvanias like I do. It's a solid shooter that's worthy of its cult status. Next to roguelikes, it feels like the rhythm shooter has been another genre indie devs have been trying to tap into as of late. I say this even though there's like 2 of them that exist alongside this game. I haven't touched BPM yet despite sitting in my library for God knows how long, but I feel like I'd still prefer Metal Hellsinger, not only for its more standard level-based structure, but also for its art style, going more for the heavy metal magazine Derek Riggs' Maiden album cover landscapes. This is one of my favorite games visually I've played this year, alongside genuinely having a really interesting story to boot. Sure, it isn't much on paper, but I was really interested in this world and everything surrounding the main character, and the way it was narrated like it was a southern campfire story just felt really cozy to me.
Hell of a night for a story, ain't it? Well, set her down, look at them stars, and I'll tell you what. South heaven, way south now, there was this soul, special, I mean to say. This soul came to hell just like a tune comes into your head.
I'll give her a second. It's the guy from Fortnite!
This game's also kind of a spiritual successor gameplay-wise to Doom 2016's arcade mode, and as one of the few fans of that mode, you should absolutely know already how much I love that. The multiplier is integrated in such a cool way with the music too, where with every tier you rise up, more parts of the song come in, leading up to the lyrics at 16x. And yeah, I need to talk about that soundtrack. There's a good reason this got nominated for so many awards, because of both the quality overall and the involvement of so many famous and prominent metal vocalists. Sure, I wasn't familiar with a whole lot of them, save for obviously Serge Tankian of System of a Down and Matt Heffy of Trivium, who all say made a song that somehow outclassed the rest of the music in Mortal Kombat 11 despite being only in a trailer and not the actual game itself, but the rest of them I found genuinely enjoyable to listen to and heightened the experience all the more. Even for someone like me who tends not to enjoy the more screamo-ish singing style, you know you did something right when the first song in the game is still a certified banger despite being mostly that. Although my favorite track of the game that truly made everything click together had to be Dissolution, featuring the vocals of Bjorn's straight up Soilwork. Having that chorus kick in the moment I hit 16x was just magic to me, and that euphoria never leaves me every time I replay this level. It's a crime that the entire soundtrack as of now still isn't on Spotify. Despite its somewhat short length and constant reuse of the same boss track up until the last one, Hellsinger is one of my favorite indies I played this year, and I really hope we get a sequel or a DLC of some kind to at least continue that story with some more vocalists to boot. It would obviously never happen because God knows how large the budget was already with the amount of artists they pulled in, but I'd love for a future entry to have a bunch of 80s, 90s boomer metal vocalists. Imagine a level with Bruce Dickinson or Ozzy on vocals. That'd be something. You want to talk about being wrong? Return to Castle Wolfenstein absolutely fucks, and is a game I'm still pissed I didn't fully appreciate prior. While I do largely prefer Machine Games' contributions to the Wolfenstein IP, those games wouldn't even exist if not for all the story elements and gameplay ideas this one puts forward. My problem with RTCW back then was that I played it purely like an arena shooter, running and jumping constantly, when that just isn't how you're intended to play at all. Consistent movement and positioning by all means, but you sometimes need to take some small moments to take a step back and either get behind cover to catch your breath or crouch during a firefight to get some better accuracy. Many people like to point at this as one of the last real fast-paced shooters before the industry got oversaturated by slower, more military-based ones. But to me, RTCW sort of feels like a mix of both. A fast-paced shooter with elements of what you'd see more often later in stuff like Call of Duty. A game stuck between the 6th and 7th gen, carrying elements from both. It makes sense when you consider that the people behind this, Grey Matter Studios, would later become Treyarch, known for some of the best games in the Call of Duty series. There's a reason people say this is the best Wolfenstein game, and that's because it's just everything the series does best and is known for, all distilled into one amazing game. It's an over-the-top, no-holds-barred World War II B-movie with fun shooting, amazing atmosphere, and a constant sense of patriotism. If you're a fan of FPS games and somehow haven't played this yet, then you're doing yourself a disservice. It's something fans need to play at least once. Co-op horde shooters are in a bit of a weird place right now. Aside from a few classic mainstays, most of the ones that come out nowadays are either okay or just plain soulless and bad. I know Deep Rock Galactic exists, but even I kinda consider that a bit of an exception compared to the other games I bring up in this group. I'm not saying DRG is bad for the record. I've put in a good 30 or so hours on Gunner and enjoyed every second of it. And I'd also consider it one of the best examples of a live service indie game that feels worth it no matter what the price point is. But I consider DRG a bit different from those other games with its use of procedurally generated levels and emphasis on resource gathering for golds. But despite all the mediocrity that seems to be put out in this genre constantly, there is still hope. Warhammer Darktide is the most fun co-op horde shooter I've played in a long time, and feels like a true evolution of the gameplay structure Valve pioneered with Left 4 Dead. Yes, the game has problems, and I won't deny that for a second. Performance and stability is all over the place, the RNG-based weapon shop is frustrating to deal with, and the fact that we have a paid cosmetic shop while also having a half-baked crafting system is kinda dumb, on top of it being seen as a downgrade from how Vermintide 2 handled its paid cosmetics. Unless you have friends to play with already, I'd definitely say wait for a sale. But despite all of this, the core gameplay of Darktide is what consistently keeps me coming back. You'd think introducing ranged weapons into a series that up to this point has been mostly focused on melee would be horribly unbalanced, but this actually has the opposite effect. Every single weapon and tool across all of Darktide's classes has a use, and smart use of all of them combined with teamwork is your only path to victory. Guns might be effective for clearing out hordes, but with how low your ammo stockpiles can be, it's also smart at some points to just melee through them so that you can save them for the more tanky specials and boss enemies. And even if the ammo pickups only give a small amount, it could be worth saving them for other players who might not have as much or are using guns with smaller ammo pools. Darktide is some of the most depth I've seen in a horde shooter yet, and it's all topped off by such a compelling world and atmosphere. 40k as a whole is something I've been wanting to get into for a while now, and I really do feel this game was a really good jumping off point for me by giving me just enough information to avoid me feeling overwhelmed and making me want to research more into the lore. I've heard some people complain about this game's story being rather shallow compared to other 40k projects, and in a way I kinda get that, but at the same time I don't feel story is a huge selling point for games like this. Writing as a whole by all means, and Darktide shines exceptionally well with its character banner. But I don't think you need a large, sprawling tale told in your face for a game where you're gonna be spending 80% of your time blasting or smashing hordes of heretics, and 20% just figuring out what you're going to use and how to build your character. I'm fine with Fat Shark starting out slow with their story elements for now to ease people in, and then begin to integrate larger overall plots as content drops happen. The world of 40k is both elegant and chaotic, and that's all the more emphasized by Darktide's godly soundtrack. I'm not super familiar with Jesper Kid's music, save for his work on the Borderlands series, and even then not a whole lot of tracks in those games really stick out in my mind, but my god, he put 110% of this soundtrack. I don't want to use the term Doom-like, but it has that sort of same feel as Mick Gordon's music of matching the gameplay pace perfectly, while also being atmospheric when it needs to be. More games period need chanting for big combat encounters. For as much as I did enjoy Metal Hellsinger, this is my personal favorite soundtrack of the year. It's been shaky, and I don't blame people for the issues they've had, but I feel Darktide is only gonna get better, and I can't wait to see what Fat Shark has in store for next year.
I've taken your love. Now I will take your life. Consider my power in a hollow grave.
Blood is a good game, but you knew that already. I've played and beaten Blood back in 2019 with the release of Fresh Supply, but it was on lightly broiled, the game's medium difficulty. It wasn't until this year I decided to go through the whole game plus the expansions again on Well Done, the second hardest difficulty, and my love for Blood just skyrocketed even more than it did prior. Blood is still a great game on lightly broiled, don't get me wrong, but I feel like the genius of its design doesn't truly shine unless you play on Well Done. Blood is hard, ball-bustingly hard. It will kick your ass time and time again so much to the point that it might seem just plain unfair. But when you begin to think more about how you deal with combat and start to employ smart use of all your weapons and movement options, the game becomes immensely satisfying to conquer. Even when you get frustrated, the overall charm and feel of the game continues to keep you coming back. The screams of the cultists when you set them on fire with a napalm blast, the bang of your sawed off, the intricately designed levels oozing with atmosphere, the sound of TNT bundles perfectly exploding on a group of zombies. Everything about Blood just clicks, and even its weaker levels aren't enough to bring down what I feel is a near masterpiece and one of the best shooters of the 90s. Blood has gone up this year as one of my favorite games of all time, and while it hasn't beaten Half-Life for personal reasons, I don't blame people at all for putting it on the same pedestal. Basically, TLDR, if you haven't played Blood, play it. If you've played Blood already, play it again on Well Done and admire how it's so hard yet fair at the same time. If you've played Blood on Well Done already, play one of the community's great map packs. I only finally got to play Deathwish this year, and the praise those maps get are not unwarranted in the slightest. It's that good. Just play Blood, now, or I will kill. But, despite how masterful of a game Blood is, there's one other game that stood out above the rest from me this year. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is a game I'm so mad it took me this long to get to until this year. It's hands down one of the best Star Wars games I've ever played, with what I believe is the best execution of lightsaber combat we've seen yet.
You what?
Now look, I love Raven's Star Wars games as much as the next guy, but to be honest, those games' combat were never exactly deep. A lot of it really was just waving your saber around randomly, one-hitting every enemy you see, occasionally clashing together during one of the few times you fight another Sith, and even then it ends in just a second with one hit. And I'm sure some asshole is gonna look at that and say, well, that's how lightsabers are supposed to work. And yeah, that's true from a realistic perspective, but I don't think that completely translates well to a game and tonal perspective, especially with the position Cal finds himself in Fallen Order. He's a Padawan that was suddenly separated from his master during the events of Order 66, and had to live a life on another planet in secret from the Empire. And the game revolves around Cal slowly regaining his lost connection with the Force as we go out to restore the Lost Jedi Order. Every battle feels like a dance in Fallen Order. You're constantly studying enemies' movements to strike and parry at the right time, and one wrong move or stim wasted can easily send you back to your last meditation circle. It's the best tonal representation of becoming a Jedi I've seen in a Star Wars game, and the journey to get there just feels so satisfying. What I love too is how the double-sided lightsaber style isn't just a flat-out replacement to the single style, but another addition to Cal's toolbox. You can use it like that if you want, but the single style is best for one-on-one encounters, while the double-bladed style works best when dealing with a group of enemies. Combine all of this with all the creative ways you can use your force powers, the exploration aspect as you go to different planets, genuinely well-written characters, and some of the best visuals this series has seen yet, you have what I believe will go down as a classic in this franchise. Even if you're as jaded as I am when it comes to Star Wars nowadays, Fallen Order is an absolute must-play even if you're just a casual fan, and I can't wait to see what the sequel has in store.